Today, we will live through one day in the life of a medieval monk. This is a forgotten world where the day begins at 2 in the morning in pitch darkness, where a single book is more valuable than a human life, where silence is not the absence of sound, but the presence of something greater. Now close your eyes, take a deep breath, and we're traveling to the 13th century, to England, to a small Benedictine monastery. If what I create resonates with your soul, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It greatly helps the project grow. Write in the comments where you are listening from and what time it is for you. I am incredibly curious to know who is joining these nighttime journeys through time. Imagine complete, absolute darkness. Not the kind you know in your bedroom, where the light of street lamps or LEDs from devices always seeps in. No, try to imagine a thick, velvety, almost tangible darkness of a medieval night when the moon is hidden behind the clouds. And in this all-consuming silence, you open your eyes, not to an alarm clock, but to the distant, dull toll of a bell. One strike, a second. It is 2 hours past midnight. Your body doesn't want to move. The cold of the stone walls has crept into your small cell, despite the coarse woolen blanket. Beneath you is a thin straw mattress on a wooden frame, and you can feel the sharp straws pricking your side through your thin shirt. Every movement is accompanied by the creak of wood and the soft rustle of straw, sounds that have become more familiar to you than the beat of your own heart. You reach out your hand in the darkness, and your fingers find a flint and steel by touch. A few precise, practiced movements and a tiny spark falls onto dry tinder. For a moment, a small flame flares up, and you carefully bring it to the wick of a tallow candle. The dim, flickering light snatches your world from the gloom. It's a space no more than 3 steps long and 2 wide. Stone walls, a wooden bed, a small stool, and a crucifix on the wall. Nothing extra, nothing personal. Everything you have, including the clothes on your back, belongs to the monastery. By the threshold stands a clay pitcher of water. The icy water from it is your first trial of the day. You scoop up a handful and splash it on your face. Feel that shock of cold which instantly banishes the last remnants of sleep, making your blood run faster. No hot shower, no comfort. Just this cold which every second reminds you of discipline and renunciation of worldly pleasures. There is nothing to dry yourself with. You simply run your wet hands over your face and hair, letting the drops run down your neck. There are no mirrors here. You haven't seen your reflection in many years and vaguely remember the features of your face. Your clothing is simple to the point of asceticism. A rough linen shirt touches your skin. Over it, a woolen tunic of a dark color, and finally, a long robe with a hood called a cowl. The fabric is coarse, prickly in places, but that is how it should be, so the body knows no softness. You always sleep in your clothes, removing only the outer robe. It is practical in the cold and symbolizes constant readiness for service. Your bare feet step onto the icy stone floor, just for a moment, and into simple leather sandals. In winter, they are stuffed with straw for warmth, but now, in autumn, you feel every unevenness of the stone under the thin sole. From waking to leaving the cell is no more than 15 minutes. Being late for the service is a sin, a violation of the sacred order, for which you will have to answer before the entire brotherhood. The monastery corridor at 2 in the morning is a world of shadows and echoes. The stone walls are damp with the night's moisture, and somewhere in the silence, water drips monotonously, a sound that measures eternity. In the narrow, slit-like windows, there is only the velvet blackness of the night. Your candle casts long, trembling shadows that dance on the walls like living creatures. You are not alone. Other figures in dark robes move along the corridor, each with their own candle. Imagine this procession of silent shadows floating through the stone labyrinths. No one speaks. The great silence is an unbreakable rule that lasts from the evening service until morning. Only footsteps and the soft rustle of fabric break the silence, which seems dense and almost palpable here. The church greets you with a wave of cold, even more intense than in your cell. The high Gothic vaults disappear into a darkness that not even all the brothers' candles can dispel. It is a vast stone space where every sound multiplies and flies upward. Imagine this atmosphere. About 40 monks take their places in the wooden choir stalls, high seats with folding ledges. All are dressed identically. All stand with their heads bowed. The air is thick with the scent of incense, wax, and cold. Ancient stones, and in response to his words, a choir of 40 male voices begins to sing. Listen, this is Gregorian chant, monophonic singing without instruments. The sound flows in a single powerful wave. It is not just music. It is a vibration that passes through your entire body, through the stone floor, through the walls. The voices merge into one stream that rises to the vaults and dissolves in the darkness. You sing the psalms, one after another. Your breath synchronizes with that of the brethren. The cold is forgotten. Fatigue recedes. Only the sound, the word, and the deep meaning you put into every note remain. The service lasts about an hour. During this time, you manage to sing 12 psalms and recite several prayers. By the end of the service, your body is fully awake and your mind reaches a special state of calm, crystalline focus. After matins, you have an hour before the next service. This is time for Lectio Divina, sacred reading. You can return to your cell or go to the cloister, a covered gallery around the monastery's inner courtyard. The autumn air is fresh and clean. Somewhere in the darkness, an owl hoots. Dawn is near, but for now, the stars still shine brightly in the sky. In your hands is a psalter, a heavy book bound in leather. Each page is parchment made from calfskin. Imagine, the creation of one such book requires the hides of an entire herd and months of meticulous work. You are holding something worth more than a wealthy peasant's house. You open the book and read by candlelight. Unhurriedly, not mechanically. Every word must enter your mind and heart. For a monk, reading is not entertainment. It is a continuation of prayer, only in silence. In a world where books are so scarce, every word read is a priceless gift. You belong to a tiny group of people who know how to read. Out of 1,000 people living around, perhaps 10 are literate. As the first signs of dawn appear in the east, the bell calls again for the service. Lords. It is about 4 o'clock in the morning. The church is no longer so dark. A grey, pearly light begins to filter through the narrow stained glass windows. Now you can see the faces of the brethren, tired but focused and serene. This service is shorter, about half an hour. Again psalms, again prayers. Your voice is a little tired, but you continue. This is your labor. This is your service. After the service, the sky brightens with each passing minute. You hear the world outside the monastery walls waking up. The distant crowing of roosters, the lowing of cows from the monastery's byre, the creak of a cart on the road. The day has truly begun. Around 6 in the morning, another short service, called Prime. And after it, finally, the first meal of the day. You enter the refectory, a long, narrow hall with rows of wooden tables and benches. Everything here is strict and functional. No decorations except for a large crucifix on the wall. The brethren sit down in complete silence. One of the young monks ascends the pulpit and begins to read aloud. During meals, the Holy Scripture or the lives of saints are always read. Conversation is forbidden. The only sounds are the reader's voice and the soft clatter of wooden spoons against bowls. Imagine the meal of a medieval monk. Before you on the rough wooden table lies a piece of dark barley bread. It is dense, sour, with bran. Beside it is a bowl of oatmeal, cooked in water. No butter, no sugar. Just porridge and a pinch of salt. There is also a small piece of cheese, hard, salty, aged. And a mug of beer. Yes, beer, but very weak, almost like kvass. Water in the 13th century was often unsafe to drink, and the weak beer brewed in the monastery was considered a healthier drink. There is no meat. According to the rule of Saint Benedict, meat is forbidden for monks except in cases of severe illness. Sometimes on major holidays, fish is allowed. But today is an ordinary day. This simple food seems incredibly delicious after many hours of prayer and cold. It gives you strength for the work ahead. After the meal, the time for work begins. It will last until the noon. Each monk has his obedience, a duty. Someone goes to the garden, someone to the bakery, someone to care for the sick in the infirmary. Your obedience is to work in the scriptorium, the place where books are copied. The day continues in a strict rhythm. Every 3 hours the bell will call you to a short service. Terce at 9 in the morning, sext at noon, none at 3 in the afternoon. Prayer constantly punctuates the work, not allowing the mind to be distracted by worldly concerns. At noon, the second meal, slightly more substantial. Boiled vegetables like turnips or lentils might be added to the bread and porridge. After dinner, monks are allowed a short rest. Some may sleep a little, others walk in the cloister. You prefer to sit in the monastery garden. Here, among the beds of medicinal herbs, sage, mint, rosemary, you find peace. The scents mix with the smell of damp earth. You watch the bees collecting nectar. It is a peaceful, orderly life, full of meaning. The afternoon work is less intensive. Often it is mending clothes, making candles, or other household tasks. Then at sunset, around 6 in the evening, Vespers, one of the most beautiful services. The church is filled with the warm light of the setting sun. Hymns of thanksgiving are sung. After Vespers, a light supper, if it is permitted on that day. Often it is just leftover bread and beer. And finally the last service, Compline. It is the shortest and quietest. After it, the abbot sprinkles the brethren with holy water, and the great silence begins. That's it. The day is over, you return to your cell around 8 in the evening. You extinguish the candle. You lie down on your hard bed. Your body aches with fatigue, but your soul is at peace. Outside the wall, silence. You know that in 6 hours the bell will call you into the darkness again, and it will all begin anew. Day after day, year after year, in this eternal cycle of prayer and work lies your entire life. And you fall asleep with a deep sense of gratitude for this day, for this simple and meaningful routine. Now that you've felt what it's like to be a medieval monk, let's take a step back. Let's look at the world in which this monastery existed, at England in the 13th century, at a time that was completely unlike ours. Imagine a map of Europe in the 1200s. This is a world without borders in the modern sense. No passports, no nationalities. There are kingdoms, duchies, counties, but power belongs not to countries, but to people. Kings, barons, bishops, and monasteries. Yes, monasteries. Because in the 13th century, a monastery is not just a place of prayer. It's an economic center, a political force, a hub of culture and knowledge. Imagine a large abbey of that time. It's an entire state in miniature. It has thousands of hectares of land, dozens of villages where peasants live and work, mills where grain is ground, bakeries, forges, breweries, fish ponds, orchards. All of this belongs to the monastery and is managed by the monastery. Peasants pay taxes in grain, wool, labor. The monastery sells surplus at the markets of neighboring towns, accumulates wealth, builds new buildings, buys even more land. The wealthiest abbeys of England at that time owned territories comparable to those of powerful barons. Their abbots sat on the king's council alongside earls. Their opinion could change the course of political events. But this is only one side of monastic life. There was another, the one that concerned ordinary people. Imagine a 13th century peasant. His life passes in a small village where everyone knows each other. He works the land from dawn to dusk, plows the field with a wooden plow, sows grain by hand, reaps with a sickle. His home is a hut with a thatched roof. One room for the whole family. Earthen floor. No windows, just a hole in the roof for smoke from the hearth to escape. Food is simple and monotonous. Bread, porridge, sometimes vegetables. Meat is a rarity a few times a year on major holidays. In winter there's often not enough food. Many don't survive until spring, and for this peasant, the monastery is something special. It's a place where help can be found in hard times. In a crop failure year, the monastery distributes food to the poor. The monastery infirmary treats the sick. The methods are primitive, but it's better than nothing. Monastery schools teach boys from poor families to read and write, a rare chance to change one's fate. But most importantly, the monastery gives hope. Hope for salvation of the soul. In a world where death lurks at every turn, where infant mortality reaches 50%, where people die from diseases that today are cured in a week, faith in the afterlife was not a luxury, but a necessity. Monks prayed for the souls of the living and the dead. Wealthy people bequeathed lands and money to monasteries in exchange for eternal prayers. The poor came to services to hear the singing, see the beauty of the church, feel the presence of something greater than their difficult daily life. Now imagine England itself in the 13th century. It's a country with about 3 million inhabitants. For comparison, now about 60 million people live in England. In those times, 90% of the population were peasants. They live in villages, rarely leave their native places. Many never go farther than 10 kilometers from home in their entire lives. There are few cities, and they're tiny by modern standards. London, the largest city in the country, has only about 50,000 inhabitants. York, the second largest, about 10,000. A typical medieval town is a few narrow streets surrounded by a wall. You can walk around everything in 20 minutes. Roads are bad. Travel is dangerous. Robbers in the forests. Wild animals, wolves, still roam English forests. It's best to travel with a group with armed guards. A trip from London to York takes a week on horseback. On foot, 2 to 3 weeks. In this world, monasteries play another important role. They're resting places for travellers. Inns aren't everywhere. But in any monastery, a traveller can stop for the night, get food and shelter. Often for free, as an act of Christian charity. Now about time and the calendar. In the 13th century, there are no clocks in the modern sense. There are sundials, but they only work during the day and only in clear weather. Time is measured by the position of the sun and by the ringing of bells. It's monastery bells that structure the day for the entire area. Peasants start work when they hear the morning ringing. Return home at the evening bell. The year is divided not into months, but into church holidays. People don't say, let's meet in July, but let's meet after the feast of St. John. The entire calendar of life is connected to the church. Christmas, Easter, Saints' Days. These are the milestones by which people orient themselves in time. Literacy is rare. Out of 1,000 people, maybe 10 to 20 can read. Mainly priests, monks, some nobles and merchants. There are almost no books. A large monastery library might contain 100 books, and this is considered enormous wealth. For comparison, now an average public library holds tens of thousands of books. News spreads slowly. An event that occurred in London might reach northern England in a month. No newspapers, no radio, no internet. Information is passed orally through travellers, merchants, wandering monks. Medicine is primitive. Average life expectancy is about 30 years. But this doesn't mean everyone died at 30. It's just that very many children died in infancy, which lowered the average. If a person lived to 20, they had a good chance of living to 50 or even 60. Diseases that today are treated with antibiotics in a week were killers then. An infection from a cut could lead to death. Childbirth was dangerous. Many women died in childbirth. Epidemics regularly decimated entire villages. In this context, a monastery looks like an island of stability, an island of order in a chaotic world. Here there is routine. Here there are rules. Here there is purpose. Here there is knowledge, books, medicinal herbs, healing methods. And that's precisely why many people chose monastic life, not only from religious calling, but also because it was an opportunity to live a meaningful, orderly life, an opportunity to learn, an opportunity to be part of something greater. Of course, monastic life was hard. Cold, strict routine, asceticism, constant discipline. But in return, a monk received what most people of that time didn't have: security, stability, and a sense of purpose. This was a world we can barely imagine today. A world without electricity, without cars, without modern medicine. A world where life was short and hard. But it was a world where people found meaning in faith, in work, in community, and monasteries were the heart of that world. Now let's talk about what constituted the very essence of monastic life, about the two pillars on which the entire existence of a monk rested.
Ora et labora, pray and work.
These two Latin words defined every day, every hour of life in the monastery. Imagine, your life is divided into two equal parts.
Half the time prayer, half work.
And both these parts are equally important. Both are service. Both are a path to salvation. Let's start with work. With your obedience, copying books. The scriptorium is located on the second floor of one of the monastery buildings. It's a long room with a row of narrow windows facing east. Precisely east, so that the morning light illuminates the work tables as long as possible. It's colder here than in other parts of the monastery. High ceilings, stone walls, constant drafts. But books don't like heat and moisture, so the scriptorium is deliberately kept cool and dry. Inside, several monks are already working. Each sits at his high, slanted table by a window.
No one raises their head when you enter.
It's not customary to be distracted here. You can only hear the light scratching of quills on parchment, an occasional cough, the rustle of a turned page. Your workspace is by the third window. The wooden table, polished by years of use, stands at an angle so the light falls correctly, creating no shadows from your hand. On a small shelf nearby lie your tools, several goose quills of different thicknesses, a small iron knife for sharpening and trimming quills, pumice for smoothing the parchment surface, a ruler and awl for marking lines, a small sponge for erasing mistakes. Today you continue work on a copy of the Gospel of John. The original you're copying from rests on a special stand to the left of your workspace. It's an old book, the parchment yellowed, the edges of some pages worn, the ink faded in places. Your task is to create a new clean copy that will serve for several more centuries. Imagine the process. You take a quill, dip it in ink, shake off the excess with a light movement, and begin to write. Each letter must be perfect. You write in large, clear, uncial script, a style that's easy to read and looks solemn. Letters are formed slowly, carefully. First, the vertical strokes, then the rounded elements, flourishes, connections. One word takes several seconds, one line takes several minutes. This work is monotonous, exhausting, and demands absolute concentration. You cannot make a mistake. Parchment is too expensive to spoil. One sheet of parchment is the skin of an entire lamb or calf, tanned, cleaned, stretched, and polished. Creating one book requires the skin of an entire herd. If you make an error, it can be carefully scraped away with a knife or erased with a damp sponge. But this leaves a mark, thins the parchment, makes it vulnerable to tears. After an hour of work, your back begins to ache. The position is uncomfortable. You sit on a hard bench without a backrest, bent over the table, your right hand constantly suspended, your left holding the parchment. Your neck stiffens, shoulders tense, eyes tire from the strain. You must constantly peer at the tiny letters of the original. Watch your hand, avoid blots and smudges. The light from the window is dim, especially on such an overcast October day. You often squint, bring the parchment closer to the window, trying to make out the details of the letters. In winter, when days become truly short, work in the scriptorium almost ceases. Copying by candlelight or oil lamps is dangerous. You can ruin the text, not to mention the risk of fire among precious books. From time to time, you stop to sharpen your quill. A goose quill quickly dulls against the rough surface of parchment. The tip splits or wears down. You take the small sharp knife and carefully cut the tip of the quill at the proper angle. Make a small slit in the middle to hold the ink. Test the sharpness on a scrap of unnecessary parchment. This process repeats dozens of times throughout the day. Work in the scriptorium tolerates no haste. In a day you might copy 1 or 2 pages of text. This is considered a good result. One book takes months, sometimes years of work. An entire Bible is several years' labor for one copyist, or the collaborative work of several monks, each responsible for their portion. But this work is not merely mechanical copying. Copying sacred texts, you meditate on each word, absorbing their meaning.
This is a form of prayer, a form of service.
Each letter is an act of devotion. Each page is a contribution to preserving divine wisdom for future generations. You know that the books you create will outlive you by centuries, that your labor has eternal value. Among monk copyists exists an unspoken hierarchy. There are simple scripters like you who simply copy text. There are rubricators who add red headings and notations. There are illuminators, true masters, who create miniatures and intricate ornaments in the most important books. And there are correctors, senior monks, Latin scholars, who check finished pages for errors. Your work is valued in the monastery. Unlike monks working in the fields or on the livestock yard, you don't come to meals dirty and exhausted. Your hands are clean, though your fingers are constantly stained with ink. These black and red spots on the skin become a distinctive mark of the scripter. You're exempted from the heaviest physical labor, though you must still participate in communal work during harvest time or other important occasions. By midday, the fingers of your right hand begin to tremble from fatigue. On your middle finger, where the quill constantly presses against the skin, a hard callus has formed, the professional mark of all scribes. You set down the quill, carefully blot the last line with thin cloth so the ink won't smear, and stand stretching stiffened muscles. Now about the second half of your life. About prayer. Imagine, the day is divided into 8 parts. 8 services which are called hours.
These are not just ceremonies.
This is the structure of time. This is the rhythm in which you live. Everything begins at 2 in the morning with matins, then at dawn, lauds, at 6 in the morning, prime, the first hour, at 9, terce, the 3rd hour, at noon, sext, the 6th hour, at 3 in the afternoon, none, the 9th hour,
At sunset, vespers.
and before sleep, compline, between services, work, food, short rest. But the service always returns. The bell rings, and you put aside everything you're doing and go to church.
It doesn't matter if you're tired or not.
It doesn't matter if you want to or not. This is not discussed. This is the rule. Each service is built around psalms. 150 psalms of David. In a week, monks must sing them all. Psalms are distributed among the services, At each service, a certain number of psalms are sung in a certain order. This singing, Gregorian chant, creates a special state of consciousness. It's not ordinary singing. It's meditation in sound, a monophonic melody that flows like a river.
There's no harmony in the modern sense. Only one voice multiplied by 40.
The sound fills the church space, resonates in the stone vaults, passes through the body. Imagine you stand in a dark, cold church. Around you, the brethren.
Everyone sings together.
Your breathing synchronizes with the breathing of others. Your voice becomes part of a single stream. In this moment, individuality disappears.
You're not a separate person.
You're part of a whole, part of a community that prays as a single organism. This state is hard to describe in words. It's not ecstasy, not an emotional uplift. It's deep calm, clarity of mind, a sense of the presence of something greater. Many monks say that it's in these moments they feel closeness to the divine, not through visions, not through miracles, but through simple, repetitive action, singing ancient words in the community of brothers. The service is not entertainment. It's labor, spiritual labor, standing for several hours a day, singing when your throat is tired, concentrating when your mind wants to wander, returning attention again and again to the words of prayer, and in this labor there is its own reward. Gradually, day by day, year by year, something changes inside. The mind becomes calmer.
Emotions more stable.
The ability appears to find peace even in difficult circumstances. A sense of meaning appears that most people in the world outside the monastery walls don't have. Monks don't wait for revelations.
Don't wait for miracles.
They simply do their work.
Day after day.
Prayer and work.
Work and prayer.
And in this simplicity, in this constancy, lies their path, ora et labora. Pray and work. Two words that define all life. Two actions that transform ordinary existence into service. It's not an easy path. But for those who chose it, it's the only path that makes sense. Every monastery holds its own stories. Some are recorded in chronicles. Others are passed from mouth to mouth, gathering details with each generation. Today I'll tell you about one of the most amazing stories of medieval England, about a story that changed the fate of an entire monastery and spawned a legend that lives to this day. This is the story of Glastonbury. Glastonbury is not just a monastery. It's one of the most sacred places in medieval England, a place shrouded in legends long before Christianity arrived, a place where, according to tradition, Joseph of Arimathea himself set foot, bringing here the Holy Grail, a place where, it was said, the legendary King Arthur was buried. By the end of the 12th century, Glastonbury Abbey was one of the wealthiest in England.
Imagine a huge complex of buildings surrounded by a wall.
A magnificent church with tall towers, an extensive library with hundreds of the rarest books, a scriptorium where the country's best copyists and illuminators worked, a treasury full of golden reliquaries and precious gifts, thousands of hectares of land, dozens of villages bringing income. And then one night, in May 1184, everything changed. Imagine that night. The monks sleep after Compline. Silent, and suddenly someone shouts, "Fire!" The monks run out of their cells and see a terrifying picture. The church is burning. Huge flames burst from the windows, lick the stone walls, rise toward the wooden roof beams. A fire in a medieval building is a catastrophe. There are no fire brigades, no pumps, no organized help. There are only buckets of water and human hands. Monks run to the wells, draw water, form chains, pass buckets hand to hand. But the fire has already gained strength. The church's wooden roof caught fire like a torch. Chronicles of that time tell that the monks tried to save at least the most valuable things. They rushed into the burning church, trying to carry out sacred relics, books, church utensils. Someone managed to grab a silver crucifix, someone an ancient manuscript, but most of the treasures remained inside. By morning, only charred walls remained of Glastonbury's magnificent church. The fire destroyed not only the church itself, it spread to neighbouring buildings. Most of the library burned. The scriptorium burned with all its tools and unfinished works.
Living quarters burned.
The treasury survived, but many relics were damaged by fire and smoke. This was a blow from which many monasteries could not have recovered. Glastonbury lost not only buildings, it lost the symbols of its greatness, ancient relics that attracted pilgrims from all over England.
Books collected over centuries.
Works of art created by generations of masters. But the monks of Glastonbury did not give up. The abbot of the abbey, a man named Henry de Blois, began a restoration campaign. He appealed to the king for help, wrote letters to all corners of England asking for donations, sent monks to collect funds in towns and villages. Money flowed in.
Pilgrims donated.
Wealthy lords gave lands. The king allocated subsidies. Construction of a new, even more magnificent church began. Work went slowly. Building a large cathedral in those times took decades. But work progressed, and then something amazing happened. Something that transformed Glastonbury from just a wealthy monastery into a pilgrimage site known throughout Europe. In 1191, 7 years after the fire, the monks announced an incredible discovery. Digging in the ground on the territory of the old churchyard, they discovered an ancient grave, very ancient. And in this grave, as they claimed, lay the remains of none other than King Arthur himself and his queen Guinevere. Imagine the excitement this news caused. King Arthur was a legend, the hero of countless songs and stories. But was he a real person?
No one knew for sure.
And now the monks of Glastonbury claimed they had found his grave. They described the find in detail.
A huge oak coffin lying deep in the earth.
A lead cross with an inscription in Latin. Here lies the famous King Arthur on the Isle of Avalon. Bones of unusually large size, confirming legends that Arthur was a giant among men. Next to him, more delicate bones that, in the monk's opinion, belonged to Guinevere. She even had hair preserved, golden, braided. But when a monk tried to touch it, it crumbled to dust. This story spread across England with the speed of wildfire. Pilgrims flooded to Glastonbury. Everyone wanted to see the place where the legendary king was buried, see his remains. Touch history, donations doubled, tripled. Money flowed like a river. Construction of the new church accelerated. Glastonbury became wealthy and influential again. But was this discovery real, or was it a brilliant medieval PR stunt? Historians debate this to this day. On one hand, legends about Arthur and Avalon were indeed associated with Glastonbury even before the fire. The place had special significance. On the other hand, the timing of the discovery looks too convenient. The monastery in desperate need, money needed for restoration, and suddenly such a discovery. The lead cross with the inscription about Arthur disappeared centuries later, so verifying its authenticity is impossible. The bones were solemnly reburied in the new church in 1278, in the presence of King Edward the Third. But they too disappeared after the dissolution of the monasteries under King Henry VIII in the 16th century. Whether it was truth or a skillful hoax, we'll never know, but the result is undeniable. Glastonbury not only recovered from catastrophe, it became even more famous. The legend of Arthur attracted pilgrims for centuries, and the monastery itself prospered until the dissolution of monasteries in 1539. This story teaches us something important. Medieval people were not naive simpletons as they're sometimes portrayed. They knew how to use legends and symbols, knew how to turn catastrophe into opportunity, knew how to create narratives that served their purposes. The fire of 1184 could have been the end of Glastonbury.
Instead, it became the beginning of a new chapter.
The monks didn't just restore buildings, they created a story that lives to this day. Today, the ruins of Glastonbury Abbey are one of the most visited historical sites in England. Thousands of tourists come every year to see the remains of the great monastery. Many come searching for traces of King Arthur. The place remains shrouded in mystique and legend, but behind these legends stands a real history. The history of a medieval monastery that survived catastrophe. The history of monks who didn't give up in the face of destruction. The history of human ingenuity, faith, and perseverance. And perhaps a story about how sometimes legend can be stronger than truth.
How belief in the miraculous can work real miracles.
How the stories we tell about the past shape our present. Medieval monks understood this. They knew the power of stories, knew that a properly told story could change fate, could turn ruins into a shrine, could give hope where it seemed none remained. And in this, perhaps, is their greatest lesson for us. When we think of the Middle Ages, we often imagine a dark era, a time of ignorance and backwardness. But this is a deep misconception. The 13th century was a time of amazing technological achievements, a time when human ingenuity created things that seem incredible even today. Let's look at the world of medieval technologies through the eyes of our monk. What does he see around him? What inventions make his life possible? Let's start with the monastery itself. With its buildings, imagine a Gothic cathedral, a huge stone building that towers over the entire area, walls several meters thick.
Vaults rising to dizzying heights. Narrow windows through which multicolored light from stained glass pours. How is it even possible to build this without modern technology?
Without cranes, without steel, without computer design? The answer, through a brilliant understanding of physics and mathematics. Medieval builders didn't know modern terms, didn't know formulas, but they understood how forces work, how stone presses down, how an arch distributes weight, how a buttress keeps a wall from falling. Gothic architecture is not just a style, it's a technological revolution. Before Gothic, churches were built thick and squat. Romanesque churches with their massive walls and small windows, but Gothic changed everything. The invention of the pointed arch allowed weight to be distributed more efficiently. The invention of the buttress, moving support outward, making walls thinner. The invention of the flying buttress allowed building even higher, even lighter. The result? Buildings that seem weightless. Walls consisting almost entirely of glass.
Spaces filled with light.
This was a miracle of engineering thought. Building a large cathedral took decades, sometimes centuries, but each generation of builders passed knowledge to the next. Masters trained apprentices. Trade secrets were kept in guilds. Knowledge accumulated, methods improved. Now imagine, all this was done by hand. Each stone was cut from the quarry by hand, lifted into place using ropes, pulleys, and human strength, fitted to neighboring stones with millimeter precision. And all this without modern measuring instruments. Monasteries were not only users of these technologies, they were their custodians and developers. In monastic libraries, ancient texts were preserved. Works of Roman engineers, Greek mathematicians, Arab scholars. Monks didn't just copy these texts. They studied them, applied knowledge in practice, experimented. Look at the monastic water supply system. This is not just a well. This is a complex engineering system. Water is supplied from a source that may be a kilometer from the monastery. It flows through ceramic pipes or stone channels laid underground. The system uses the force of gravity. The source is always higher than the monastery. Water first enters a large cistern, a reservoir where it settles and impurities sink. Then it's distributed throughout the monastery. A separate line goes to the kitchen, another to the infirmary, where water is needed for washing patients, a third to the washroom, where monks wash their hands before meals, a fourth to the latrines, where running water ensures hygiene. This is infrastructure that many cities of that time didn't have. Monasteries were at the forefront of sanitary technologies, or take mills. In the 13th century, England is covered with a network of water mills.
Thousands of them across the country.
Many belong to monasteries. A water mill is an amazing invention. It takes the energy of flowing water and converts it into mechanical work. Water turns a large wheel. The wheel, through a system of gears, drives millstones. The millstones grind grain. One miller with a mill can produce as much flour as 10 people grinding by hand, but water mills are used not only for grinding grain. They drive hammers in forges,
Saws in sawmills.
presses for extracting oil from seeds. These are the first industrial machines. Humanity's first attempts to use the force of nature to ease labor. Monasteries were also centers of agricultural innovation. Cistercian monks, for example, were famous for their farming methods. They drained swamps, turning them into fertile fields, bred sheep of new, more productive breeds, perfected methods of food storage. Monastic infirmaries were places of medical knowledge development. Of course, medieval medicine was primitive by modern standards, but it wasn't just superstition. Monks studied herbs, their properties, created medicinal gardens where they grew dozens of plants, recorded recipes, shared knowledge between monasteries. Many modern medicines have roots in medieval monastic medicine. Willow bark, from which aspirin was later obtained. Foxglove, still used to treat heart disease. Mint, chamomile, sage, all these plants monks used for centuries. And what about time? How did monks, who had to observe a strict schedule of 8 services a day, measure time? Sundials only worked during the day and in clear weather. Water clocks, clepsydrae, were more reliable. Water dripped from one vessel to another at a constant rate. By the water level, you could determine how much time had passed. Monasteries used these clocks to control time between services. In the 13th century, the first mechanical clocks began to appear. Complex devices with gears and counterweights. They were still imperfect, often wrong. But this was the beginning of a revolution in timekeeping, and many of the first mechanical clocks were installed precisely in monasteries. Let's turn to book creation, the technology that was the heart of monastic culture. The process of creating a book in the 13th century was the most complex technological process. It began with parchment making. Animal skin was soaked in lime solution to remove hair, then stretched on a frame, scraped of remaining meat and fat with a special crescent knife, dried under tension, polished with pumice until smooth. The result? A thin, strong, durable writing material. Parchment could be stored for centuries without losing quality. Books written on parchment in the 13th century have survived to this day. Inks were made according to complex recipes. The base, iron compounds and tannins from galls forming on oak. They were infused, filtered, gum added for viscosity. For red inks, cinnabar or red lead was used. For gold inscriptions, real gold, ground to powder and mixed with a binder. Writing quills were made from the flight feathers of geese. They had to be properly dried, trimmed, the tip split. A good quill in the hands of an experienced scribe allowed creating letters of amazing beauty and precision and illumination. Manuscript decoration was a true art. Miniatures were painted with brushes made of squirrel hair, thinner than human. Paints were made from minerals and plants. Lapis lazuli, imported from Afghanistan, gave a luxurious blue color. Gold leaflets were applied to specially prepared surfaces. All this was technology of the highest level. Technology requiring years of training, precision, patience. Medieval monasteries were not dark fortresses of ignorance. They were centers of knowledge, innovation, technological progress. Places where the wisdom of the past was preserved and achievements of the future were created. Without monasteries, many ancient texts would have been lost. Without monasteries, the development of architecture, engineering, medicine, agriculture would have progressed much more slowly. They were a bridge between antiquity and the Renaissance, keepers of knowledge in difficult times, and creators of technologies that changed the world. Medieval society is often described by a simple formula: those who pray, those who fight, and those who work. 3 estates, 3 worlds existing side by side but living completely differently. Today we'll look at these 3 worlds through the eyes of our monk. He sees them all. He interacts with them. He understands how different their fates are. Let's start with the peasants, those who work. They make up 90% of the population. Without them, life in neither monastery nor castle nor city is possible. Imagine a peasant named William. He's about 30 years old, though he looks older. His face is weathered, skin rough from constant work under sun and wind.
Hands calloused.
Back bent from years of labor in the fields. William lives in a small village belonging to the monastery.
He has a plot of land about 10 acres. This is not his land.
It belongs to the monastery. He merely works it. For this right he pays rent, gives part of his harvest to the monastery, works a third of his time on monastic fields, and pays various taxes and duties. His home is a hut with a thatched roof. One room where he, his wife, 4 children, and several chickens live. The floor is earthen. There's almost no furniture, a table, a bench, several straw beddings for sleeping. No windows, just a hole in the roof for smoke from the hearth to escape. Food is simple and monotonous. The basis is bread, dark, coarse, from barley or oats, porridge from the same grains. Vegetables from the garden, cabbage, onions, turnips, sometimes cheese. Meat is rare, a few times a year. Fish, if lucky enough to catch in the stream or monastery pond. William's day begins at dawn. He goes to the field with a wooden plough pulled by his only ox, ploughs the land, sows grain by hand, weeds, reaps with a sickle, threshes with flails, everything by hand. Every grain he eats has passed through his hands dozens of times. Winter is easier, less field work. But then tools need repairing, firewood gathering, livestock tending. Work never stops. William is not free. He's a villain, a person tied to the land.
He cannot simply leave the village, cannot choose other work, cannot marry without the monastery's permission.
His life is determined from birth, but he also has some rights. The monastery cannot evict him from the land, cannot arbitrarily increase rent. If the harvest is poor, the monastery is obliged to help, give grain from stores to survive winter. This is a paternalistic system. The monastery owns the peasants, but also cares for them. Once a week, William comes to the monastery church for Sunday service. This is the only moment when his life touches something greater. He doesn't understand Latin in which the service is conducted, but the singing impresses him. The beauty of the church amazes him. For a few hours he feels part of something important. Now imagine another world, the world of those who fight, knights and nobility. A few miles from the monastery stands a castle,
A stone fortress on a hill.
Here lives Sir Robert, the local lord, landholder from the king. Sir Robert's life is completely unlike William's. He lives in the castle's great hall.
Walls decorated with tapestries. On the floor, rush mats. There's a fireplace heating the room.
Windows are glazed, an incredible luxury. He eats meat every day. Game from his forests, venison, boar, hares, poultry, pheasants, ducks, fish from ponds.
White wheat bread.
Wine brought from France. Spices from the east, pepper, cloves, ginger. Sir Robert's clothes are made of finely woven wool, dyed with expensive dyes. Over it, a cloak lined with fur.
On his feet, leather boots.
At his belt, a sword in richly decorated scabbard. But his life is not only luxury.
It's a life full of dangers and obligations. Sir Robert is the king's vassal.
He holds land on condition of military service. If the king calls him to war, he must appear with his men, on his horse, in full armour. To refuse means losing lands and honour. War in the 13th century is not a romantic adventure. It's mud, blood, danger. Knights die in battles, die from wounds, are taken captive. Ransom for a knight can ruin his family. Even in peacetime, a knight's life is dangerous. Tournaments, military competitions often end in serious injuries or death.
Feuds between lords are constant. Robbers on roads.
Hunting accidents. Sir Robert is also bound by a web of obligations. He owes loyalty to the king, must maintain order on his lands, must judge his peasants,
Must keep the castle battle ready.
must participate in politics, attend assemblies, maintain alliances. His relationship with the monastery is complex. On one hand, he's pious, donates money, attends important services.
On the other hand, there are constant conflicts.
Disputes about land boundaries, disputes about rights to forests and waters, political disagreements. For Sir Robert, the monastery is both a spiritual authority and a political rival. The abbot is a man of equal rank to him, sometimes even higher. They interact as equals, make agreements, settle disputes. Now let's return to our monk, to those who pray. He occupies a special position in this system. He doesn't work the land like a peasant, doesn't fight like a knight, but his function is no less important. Monks pray for the souls of all, for peasants, for knights, for kings. In a world where the afterlife is considered more important than earthly life, this is an enormous responsibility. Monks are mediators between man and God. Their prayers, people believe, can save a soul from eternal torment. For this, monks are fed, clothed, provided with everything necessary. Peasants work in monastic fields. Nobility donates lands and money. In return, monks pray. But monks are not just parasites living at others' expense. They perform important social functions. The monastery is a hospital. The infirmary is open to all, both peasants and travellers. Here diseases are treated, wounds bandaged, the infirm cared for. The monastery is a shelter. Travellers can stop here for the night, get food and shelter. In crop failure years, the monastery distributes bread to the poor. The monastery is a school. Boys from poor families can get education here, learn to read and write, perhaps become monks themselves, the only path of social advancement for a peasant's son. The monastery is a cultural centre. Books are kept here. Art is created here. Chronicles are kept here. History is recorded. The monastery is an economic centre. It organises production, trade, maintains roads and bridges on its lands, gives work to craftsmen. Our monk understands all this. He sees peasants coming to Sunday service, sees their worn clothes, tired faces, knows how hard their life is, and feels responsibility to pray for them. He sees Sir Robert arriving at the monastery on horseback, in rich clothes with a sword at his side, knows about his wealth and power, but also knows about the burden the night bears,
About constant danger.
about political intrigues, and he understands his place. He chose the third path. Not wealth, not power, not family. The path of prayer and service. The path that he believes leads to salvation of the soul. 3 worlds, 3 different lives, 3 different fates. But they're all connected. The peasant feeds the knight and monk. The knight protects the peasant and monastery. The monk prays for the peasant and knight. This is a system where everyone depends on others, where everyone performs their role, a system unjust by modern standards. But for people of the 13th century, this was the natural order of things, an order established by God, an order that seemed eternal and unchanging, though of course it wasn't eternal. But people of the 13th century didn't know this yet. We've lived through one October day with you, but monastery life changes with the seasons. Each season brings its own tasks, its own difficulties, its own joys. Let's look beyond this one day. Let's see how the monastery lives throughout the year, how nature changes outside its walls and life inside them. Let's start with winter, with the most difficult time. Imagine January. You wake at 2 in the morning to the bells ringing, but now it's not just dark, now it's freezing cold. Your breath turns to steam right in your cell. The water in the pitcher has covered with a thin crust of ice. You need to break it to wash. The cold water burns your face so that for a moment it takes your breath away. You put on your robe, and it seems damp from the night cold. The fabric is stiff, unpleasant against the body. You put on sandals. The soles are stuffed with straw for warmth, but still the cold of the stone floor seeps through them. Your toes quickly go numb. The corridor is even colder than the cell. Draughts roam the stone passages. Your candle trembles and almost goes out from the wind. You shield it with your hand, walk quickly, trying to warm yourself with movement. The church in winter is a trial. The huge stone space is impossible to heat. There's no central heating, no radiators. There are only a few braziers with coals, but they give almost no warmth into such volume. Imagine, you stand at service and cold rises from the stone floor, seeps through your clothes, grips your body. Your voice trembles from cold when you sing psalms.
Fingers stiffen, hard to bend and unbend. Nose reddens and runs.
After an hour of standing, legs are almost unfelt. When the service ends and you can move, the first steps come with difficulty. Joints have stiffened. Work in winter also changes. In the scriptorium, it's almost impossible to work. Hands stiffen so much they can't hold a quill. Ink thickens from cold, flows poorly. Illumination in winter is minimal. The day is short. There's little light from the window. But copying work almost ceases, except on rare clear days when the sun looks into the windows and gives enough light for 2 or 3 hours. But winter is time for other tasks. Repairing tools, mending clothes, making candles from beeswax accumulated over the year, weaving baskets from willow twigs harvested in autumn. Monks sit in a common room with a brazier in the middle, the only relatively warm place. They work in semi-silence, occasionally exchanging necessary words. Food in winter becomes more meagre and monotonous.
No fresh vegetables.
They eat what was preserved from autumn.
Turnips and cabbage from cellars.
Dried beans and lentils.
Salted fish. Old hard cheese.
Bread is often stale. In cold, it dries faster. But no one complains. Winter is a time of fasting and privations. Outside, the world has frozen. Fields are covered with snow. Trees are bare.
Roads impassable.
The monastery is cut off from the outside world.
No travellers.
No merchants.
Only the community itself and endless white silence around. But there's also stark beauty in winter.
Imagine dawn after a snowy night. You come out of church after matins and the world is transformed. Everything white. Snow lies on roofs, on walls, on bare tree branches in the garden. Air is clean and sharp. The sky begins to lighten in the east, first grey, then pink, then golden. The first rays of sun ignite the snow with thousands of sparks.
Silence is absolute.
Only the crunch of snow underfoot and your breathing disturb it. Christmas and Epiphany are the main winter holidays. Preparations are made in advance. The church is decorated with branches of evergreen ivy and holly with red berries. More candles are lit than usual. Special dishes appear at meals: white bread, instead of usual dark sweet wine, honey, maybe even better fish than usual, salted. Services on these days are especially solemn.
Special hymns are sung.
The abbot blesses the community. For a few hours, winter's severity recedes and hearts warm with holiday joy. And then winter continues. January, February, endless cold days, short grey days and long dark nights, waiting, patience, prayer, and faith that spring will surely come. And it does come. March. First signs of spring. Snow begins to melt, first from the south side of buildings, then in shaded corners, dripping from roofs, babbling of brooks. Earth black and damp emerges from under snow. Air changes. It's still cold, but something new appears in it, a promise of warmth, the smell of thawing earth. Birds return, first rooks, noisy black flocks.
Then starlings.
Then larks whose singing fills the morning sky. The monastery awakens with nature.
There's more work.
Need to prepare for sowing.
Fix ploughs and harrows.
Check seeds.
Clean barns.
Lead out cows and sheep to pasture, longing for fresh grass after winter. In the monastery garden, the brother gardener begins his work. Prunes dried branches.
Loosens soil around perennial herbs.
Prepares beds for sowing. This is special work requiring knowledge and feeling. The monastery garden is a source of medicinal herbs without which the infirmary is unthinkable. Imagine this garden in spring. First green shoots break through the earth. Sage with its silvery leaves.
Mint, whose scent spreads at the slightest touch.
Rosemary, remaining green even in winter, now covers with new shoots. Lavender, which will soon bloom purple. Chamomile, calendula, St. John's wort, yarrow. The brother gardener knows each plant by name, knows its properties. This knowledge was passed in the monastery from generation to generation, recorded in special herbals. When to gather,
how to dry,
how to prepare. For what diseases to use April. Work in the fields begins in earnest. Peasants from monastery villages come to plough and sow. Some monks also participate in field work. The rule of St. Benedict prescribes that all should labour physically. You might find yourself in a field, walking behind a plough, throwing barley seeds into freshly ploughed earth. It's hard work. Your back aches from constant bending.
Hands cover with calluses.
But there's something deeply satisfying in it. You feel connection with the earth. See how your labour creates the foundation for future harvest. Understand dependence on nature, on weather, on God's mercy, May. The world explodes with green. Trees cover with foliage.
Meadows with flowers.
Apple trees in the monastery garden bloom in white-pink clouds. Bees buzz collecting nectar. Air fills with aromas and life. This is a time of joy after long winter. Days become long and warm. Work in fresh air is pleasure, not trial. Food becomes more varied. First, spring vegetables appear, fresh greens, young cheese. Services can be conducted with church doors open. Monks' singing pours outside, mixes with birdsong with rustling of foliage. Imagine an evening service in May, the church flooded with golden light of setting sun. Warm wind brings the scent of flowers, and in this beauty you sing hymns of thanksgiving. Summer comes imperceptibly. June. Heat. This is another extreme after winter cold.
Sun is merciless.
Stone monastery walls heat during the day and radiate heat at night. The cell is stuffy. The church is also hot despite thick walls. In summer the schedule changes slightly. Heavy work is done early morning or late evening in coolness. At midday heat, a break. Time for siesta, which even monks practice despite strict rule. June is haymaking time.
One of the main works of the year.
Grass in meadows must be mown, dried, gathered and stacked. This is feed for cattle for next winter. The quality and quantity of hay determines whether cows and sheep will survive next winter. Imagine monks in a field at dawn. Dew still glistens on grass. Air is fresh and cool. They work with scythes, broad swings in rhythm. The sound of a scythe cutting grass is a special soothing sound. Grass falls in even rows. The smell of cut grass fills the air. Sweet, green, summery. The work is hard. By noon, backs ache, hands are covered with calluses, faces red from sun. But there's a rhythm in this work that enters the body. Swing step, body tires but mind calms. It's almost meditation in motion. July, August, heat reaches its peak. This is time of waiting for harvest. Grain ripens in fields. Ears grow heavy, bend toward earth. Monks pray for good weather.
Rain now could ruin the harvest.
Hail is catastrophe. In the monastery garden, vegetables ripen, cabbage, onions, beans, peas, turnips. The brother gardener collects them every day. Part goes to the kitchen for immediate use. Part is set aside for winter storage. The fruit orchard also gives fruit. Apples begin to ripen. First early varieties, sour and green. Then later ones, sweet, pears, plums, cherries. Some are eaten fresh, a rare treat. Some are dried for winter. Some turned into compotes and jams. August ends with the beginning of harvest, the most intense time of year.
All forces of monastery and surrounding villages are thrown into gathering the harvest.
This is a race against time. Grain must be collected before it over-ripens and scatters, before rains come. Fields are full of people. Men cut grain with sickles. Women bind sheaves. Children help, gathering remaining stalks. Work goes from dawn to dusk. Break only at noon, when the monastery sends food and beer to the fields for workers. Imagine a field during harvest. A golden sea of ears under blue sky.
Rhythmic movements of reapers.
Singing, yes, people sing during work. It helps keep rhythm and lift spirits. Sweat, fatigue, but also joy. Joy that the harvest is good, that there will be bread for next year. That hunger doesn't threaten. Collected grain is brought to barns. There it's threshed, beaten with flails to separate grains from ears. Winnowed, tossed with shovels in the wind so chaff flies away and heavy grain falls down, poured into huge wooden bins. These bins are the monastery's wealth. Their fullness determines the community's life for next year. The monk steward, responsible for economy, carefully counts supplies. How much to leave for spring sowing? How much for brethren's food?
How much for workers? How much can be sold at market?
Every decision matters. September, harvest is gathered. Barns are full. A short respite comes. Time of gratitude. A harvest festival is arranged. Fresh bread from new grain appears at meals. This is a special moment. The first bread of the new harvest has a special taste, symbolizes the year's blessing. But work doesn't end. September is time for winter preparations.
Much still needs to be gathered in the garden.
Cabbage is fermented in large barrels. Onions and garlic are dried, braided into bunches, hung in storerooms. Root vegetables, turnips, carrots are laid in cellars covered with sand for better storage. Fruits also require attention. Apples of late varieties are collected carefully to avoid damage. The best are set aside for long storage. They're laid out in a cool room so they don't touch each other. With proper storage, apples can last until spring. The monastery brewery works at full capacity. Beer is brewed from the new barley harvest for the whole year. This is the most important drink, safer than water, nutritious, stores long. The brewing process is complex. Barley is sprouted, dried, ground, then boiled with water and hops.
Left to ferment.
Poured into barrels, the monk brewer is a respected specialist. His skill is critically important. Good beer is the brethren's health. Bad beer is disease and discontent. October. We've returned to the month we started with.
Leaves change colour.
Golden, red, orange. Trees burn with autumn colours. Air becomes cooler. In morning's first frosts. This is time for taking stock.
A year of work is finished.
Harvest gathered and preserved. Stores made.
Monastery is ready for winter.
Only last preparations remain. Livestock not needed for breeding is slaughtered. Meat is salted, smoked, stored in cool rooms. This will be winter meat for special occasions and for the sick. Firewood. A huge amount of firewood needs to be prepared. Monks and workers cut trees in the monastery forest, saw into logs, split, stack in wood piles under sheds for drying. This is work for many weeks. Last vegetables are removed from beds before first real frosts. Garden is dug over, prepared for next season. Tools are cleaned, oiled, put away for storage. November. Days become short. It often rains. Fog spreads over fields. Trees lose their last leaves. Nature prepares for sleep. In the monastery, life moves indoors. More time is spent in closed rooms. It becomes cold again. Braziers are lit. Winter clothes are taken out. Warmer robes, wool stockings. This is time of remembrance for the dead. All Saints' Day, All Souls' Day, service is especially solemn and mournful. Requiem psalms are sung. Prayers for the souls of all who have departed. For brothers who died in this monastery over past centuries. For benefactors. For simple people whose names are forgotten but whose souls need prayer. December. The year approaches its end. Days are shortest, darkest. Winter solstice, the turning point. After it, days will begin to grow little by little. Christmas approaches, time of waiting and preparation.
Fast before the feast.
Special services, reading prophecies about the coming of the Saviour. And when Christmas itself arrives in the depths of winter, on the darkest night of the year, it's a festival of light. The church is flooded with light from hundreds of candles. Joyful hymns are sung. Hearts are warm despite the cold outside. And then winter continues. The circle closes. Year ends and begins again. The same cycle. the same seasons, the same work in its time. For a medieval monk, the year is not an abstract sequence of months. It's a living organism. Time of birth and death, labor and rest, joy and trials. Each season has its role. Each is necessary, and in this cycle the monk finds stability, knowledge that after winter will come spring, after sowing harvest, after labor festival. This is the natural order of things established by the Creator, and to follow it means to be in harmony with the world. Our journey is coming to an end. We've lived one day together with a medieval monk, seen the world through his eyes, felt the cold of stone walls, heard the ringing of bells, sensed the rhythm of life that repeated day after day, year after year, century after century. Let's return to our monk. To the end of this long day, the evening service is over. The last rays of the setting sun have faded beyond the horizon. The sky has darkened. The first stars have appeared above the monastery. The air has grown colder. The autumn night reminds of approaching winter. After a light supper, leftover bread, and a mug of beer, you go to the last service of the day. Compline, the shortest and quietest. The church is already almost dark. A few candles barely illuminate the space. The brethren sing in undertones, almost in whispers. These are prayers for the coming sleep, prayers for protection in the night. The abbot sprinkles everyone with holy water, pronounces the blessing. The great silence begins. Until morning, silence, you return to your cell. Walk along the familiar corridor in darkness. You know every stone underfoot, every turn. The candle in your hand casts weak light. Shadows dance on the walls. In the cell, you undress. Remove your outer robe, leaving your undergarment.
Lie down on the hard bed.
Cover yourself with a coarse woolen blanket. Put out the candle darkness, silence, cold. Your body is tired. Your back aches from long hours spent copying. Your throat is slightly hoarse from singing. Your legs are stiff from standing at services. But this is a pleasant fatigue, fatigue from work done well. From a day lived with purpose, you lie in the darkness and listen to the silence. This is not absolute silence. Such doesn't exist. Somewhere far away a door creaked. Wind rustles leaves in the monastery garden. A mouse squeaks in the corner of the cell. Water drips somewhere, a constant, monotonous sound. Your thoughts flow slowly.
You think about the day lived, about the page of the gospel you copied today, about the words of psalms you sang, about the faces of brothers in church,
about the peasant who came to the infirmary with a sick leg, and about the herbal ointment you gave him. You think about tomorrow, which will be almost the same. The same bell will wake you at 2 in the morning. The same services, the same work, the same meal, the same rhythm that doesn't change. And in this constancy there is deep peace. You know what will be tomorrow. Know your place in this world.
know your purpose.
This is a rare gift in a world full of uncertainty and chaos. You fall asleep, and in 6 hours it will all begin again. Bell, darkness, cold water, church, singing, work, prayer, day after day.
Month after month.
Year after year. This is the life of a medieval monk. What can we take from this story? What can these strange people in robes who lived 8 centuries ago give us, people of the 21st century? Perhaps the first lesson is the value of rhythm and structure. In a world where we have freedom of choice at every moment, where we constantly decide what to do next, where choice is infinite, we often feel lost. Monks didn't have this freedom. Their day was scheduled to the hour, and in this limitation they found liberation. They didn't need to constantly make decisions. They simply followed the rhythm. and this rhythm gave them peace. The second lesson is about the value of work,
Not work for money, not career for status.
but labor as service, labor that has meaning beyond material gain. The monk copyist knew that the book he was creating would outlive him by centuries, that his work served to preserve knowledge for future generations. This gave his work depth and significance. The third lesson is about the power of community. Monks were not loners. They lived in brotherhood, shared labor, prayer, food, supported each other. In a world where many of us live in isolation, where neighbors don't know each other, where connections are superficial, the experience of monastic community reminds us of the value of true human unity. The fourth lesson is about simplicity. Monks owned almost nothing.
One robe, one pair of sandals.
A cell the size of a few steps, no personal belongings.
No accumulations.
And in this simplicity was freedom. Freedom from the endless pursuit of things. Freedom from anxiety about property. Freedom to focus on what really matters. Of course, we cannot and should not copy monastic life. It was a special path, suitable for special people in a special time. But we can learn from them, can seek rhythm in our chaotic life, can find meaning in our work,
Can build true communities.
can simplify our lives. The history of medieval monks is not just the past. It's a reminder of other ways to live,
Of other values.
of other priorities. Monasteries have long disappeared or turned into ruins. That way of life is gone forever. But the lessons remain. The questions that medieval monks asked themselves are relevant today. How to live a meaningful life. How to find balance between work and rest. How to be part of something greater than yourself. How to find peace in a restless world. These questions are eternal. And perhaps by studying the past, we can find answers for the present. Thank you for walking through this day with me. Thank you for looking into a world so different from ours, but which was also real, alive, full of people with their hopes, fears, dreams. If you enjoyed this journey, please like and subscribe to the channel. There are many more stories ahead,
Many worlds we can explore together.
many lives we can live. Write in the comments what surprised you most, what you remember, what era or profession you'd like to hear about next time. For now, good night.